They called them the Russian dolls, a wave of ethereal, almost otherworldly beauty that swept through the fashion capitals of the world in the mid-2000s. Girls with porcelain skin, almond eyes, and a fragility that made them look like they belonged in a fairy tale, not on a runway. But behind the perfect photos was a story no one saw coming, a story that would end in heartbreak and unanswered questions. What if I told you that the Russian Rapunzel, Ruslana Korshunova, wasn't the only one? That less than a year after her fall from a Manhattan apartment, another model, her friend Anastasia Drozdova, met a similarly tragic end in Kiev. Two beautiful, successful young women. Two eerily similar endings. And one sinister thread connecting them both. A shadowy organization that promised transformation. Was it the crushing weight of the fashion industry? A secretive, self-help group that preyed on the vulnerable? Or something even darker? Today, we're pulling back the curtain on the two lost girls and the cult that broke them. Ruslana Korshunova grew up in Almaty, Kazakhstan, a world away from the glossy pages of Vogue. Her father passed away when she was still a child, leaving her mother Valentina to raise her alone. Ruslana was bright and sensitive, the kind of girl teachers remembered years later. She spoke several languages and dreamed of studying abroad, not of walking catwalks in Paris. When she was 15, a scout saw her picture in an in-flight magazine. Within months, the girl from Kazakhstan was suddenly walking for Marc Jacobs, Vera Wang, and Kenzo. Her knee-length hair earned her the nickname Russian Rapunzel, and her face became one of the symbols of that mid-2000s wave of Eastern European models. She signed with IMG, shared boards with Gemma Ward and Miranda Kerr, fronted a Nina Ricci fragrance campaign, and appeared in British Vogue. On paper, she had everything the industry promised. But by 2007, the bookings were slowing. At 20, she was already being treated as old by fashion's cruel standards. She'd just been through a devastating breakup with a Moscow businessman who had promised her marriage and a home, but then walked away. She was exhausted, homesick, and quietly terrified of what came after the dream. Court documents released years later would reveal another dark chapter. In 2006, when she was just 18, Ruslana had visited Jeffrey Epstein's private island. The full extent of what happened there remains unknown. Anastasia Drozdova's childhood looked very different, but the loneliness was the same. She grew up with her mother Olga in cramped dorm rooms, moving from one provincial ballet company to the next across Ukraine. Olga had wanted her daughter to follow in her footsteps, but Anastasia was too tall, too rangy for classical ballet. In old home videos, she's always a beat behind, tripping over her own feet, visibly frustrated with the body she doesn't quite know how to use. That awkwardness turned out to be perfect for modeling. Anastasia placed 14th in Elite Model Looks European competition, and 3rd for the whole of the former Soviet Union. She started working internationally, sending money home so her mother could finally buy a real apartment in Kiev. Friends remember her as the live wire at every party, with a laugh that could swallow a room. She loved to dance, to talk, to fill awkward silences, but behind the energy was the same fragility that haunted Ruslana: constant travel, rejection, unstable relationships, and the creeping sense that your value begins and ends with your face. For both women, the industry gave them everything and hollowed them out at the same time. By early 2008, they were each standing at a crossroads. A friend in Moscow told them about a place that could help. A training center that promised clarity, transformation, and a way to finally feel whole. It was called the Rose of the World. This organization presented itself as a high-end training center for personal growth. Run by a flashy Russian businessman named Vladislav Novgorodtsev, it catered to Moscow's elite. The website promised that its seminars would teach you how to realize your goals and achieve material wealth. For young women like Ruslana and Anastasia, far from home, emotionally raw, and watching their careers wobble, it must have felt like a lifeline. However, behind the glossy marketing was something far more sinister. The program was based on a controversial American system called LifeSpring, a so-called large group awareness training that had been hit with lawsuits in the United States in the 1980s. Former participants described breakdowns, trauma, and long-term psychological damage. The brand disappeared, but the methods did not. They were reborn in Russia, repackaged for a new generation of wealthy, vulnerable clients searching for meaning in a post-Soviet spiritual vacuum. The price of entry was steep, around $1,000 for a 3-day course. Ruslana and Anastasia both paid. They went together. Journalist Peter Pomerantsev, in his book Nothing is True and Everything is Possible, went undercover to see what actually happened inside those seminars. What he found was closer to a theater of cruelty than therapy. The courses were held in a Soviet Gothic palace at the All-Russian Exhibition Center in northern Moscow. When you entered, the lights were low and the sound was overwhelming. Loud music, shouting, commands. Everything was designed to stun the conscious mind and shut down critical thought. A life trainer would stride onto the stage, talking so fast that nobody could quite follow. A microphone turned up just enough to make your head ache. In the coming days, you will experience discomfort, fear, but this is good, the trainer announced. This is the inner barrier you have to break through. Around 40 people would be packed into a hall and ordered to confess their deepest traumas in front of strangers. Stories of violence, abusive parents, betrayals, failures. Participants who cried were told their pain was their own fault. Victims were told they had chosen their suffering. The goal was to induce extreme emotional distress, shatter a person's sense of self, and then rebuild it in the image of the group. It was systematic dehumanization, sold as enlightenment. Peter learned that Ruslana threw herself into these sessions. She spoke at length about her heartbreak, her grief for her father, how lost she felt in New York. She laughed too hard, then sobbed. He later wrote about 3 days of shouting, recalling repressed memories, meditation followed by dancing, tears followed by ecstasy. Every intense emotion you've ever had, stuffed into 3 life-changing days. At the end of the course came the upsell. More training, more promise, higher prices. For people already destabilized, the only thing that seemed worse than staying was leaving. Friends would later say that Ruslana and Anastasia thought they had finally found somewhere people cared about their inner world, not just their pictures in magazines. In reality, they had walked into the cruelest illusion yet. Ruslana attended the Rose of the World training for about 3 months, from January to March 2008. Anastasia stayed connected to the group for almost a year. For both, the changes were dramatic and frightening. Friends of Ruslana noticed a sharp edge that hadn't been there before. She became irritable, snapped at people, and started swearing, something she had never done. Her weight dropped. She wandered the city without really knowing why she was out. At night, she cried. On her blog, she wrote lines like, "I'm so lost. Will I ever find myself?" Fragments that read like poetry until you realize they're a diary of someone coming apart. Anastasia's transformation was even more extreme. The girl with the enormous laugh became a shadow of herself. She would start fights and then dissolve into tears. She skipped castings, which, in the modeling world, is almost unthinkable. In the final month of her life, she left Moscow for Kiev and barely left her bed, curled under a duvet during a suffocating summer heatwave, unable to face the outside world. Inside the cult, there was a name for this state: a rollback. Trainers framed it as a necessary storm before the breakthrough, proof that the process was working. In reality, it was the result of sustained psychological pressure on people who were already fragile. Vladislav later said that he had seen her and heard her stories no one else has heard. He described Ruslana as lonely, searching for peace of mind, worried about her relationship with a married man and about money. She had even asked him for financial help. He presented himself as a concerned guide, but the outcome suggests something very different. Vladislav has consistently denied that Rose of the World bore any responsibility for the tragedies. In interviews following the deaths, He maintained that the organization existed to help people and that both women had come to the training already struggling with deep personal issues. He later changed the organization's name and continued operating under different branding. When journalists and investigators later asked other trainers about the tragedies, the responses were chilling. One life coach referred to Ruslana as a typical victim and reportedly said that sometimes it's better not to exist than not to change. About Anastasia, another claimed, "She was messed up already, we tried to help her. Blame modeling, maybe drugs, not us." It was the classic pattern of coercive groups. Take credit for any perceived success, blame the individual for any collapse. Cult watchers have seen it before. Rick Ross, head of the Cult Education Institute in New Jersey, explains that these organizations work like substances. They give you peak experiences that feel euphoric, so you keep coming back for more. The serious problems start when people leave, he says. The training has become their whole world. When the workshops are over, they come back to emptiness. The most sensitive ones are the first to break. On June 28, 2008, 4 days before her 21st birthday, Ruslana Korshunova's story ended in New York's financial district. That afternoon, witnesses heard a heavy impact on the street below her building. Ruslana had fallen from the 9th floor balcony of her apartment. Her life ended there on Water Street. Investigators said there were no signs of a struggle inside and no substances in her system. They treated it as a self-inflicted tragedy. But the details left her family and friends with more questions than answers. There was no note. Some unverified reports later claimed her famous knee-length hair had been cut, though this was never confirmed by investigators. She had a ticket booked to Texas for the second part of a Neiman Marcus job. She had recently returned from a successful shoot in Paris. That evening, she was meant to attend a close friend's birthday party. The apartment itself was tidy, almost ordinary, fresh linens, books neatly stacked. To her mother, Valentina, that did not look like someone preparing to give up, and she has never accepted the official explanation. Less than a year later, in June 2009, tragedy struck Anastasia's family too. She fell from the top of an apartment block in Kiev. This time there was a short note to her loved ones. "Forgive me for everything. Cremate me." When her mother searched her room, she found documents from Rose of the World with unsettling phrases written on them. One line read, "Anastasia, your lullaby is winter's end. You're on your way." Two young women who had once danced at the same parties, shared the same Moscow circles, and sat through the same trainings. Two lives ending in the same brutal way, less than a year apart. On their own, each loss could be written off as a private tragedy. Together, and in the context of what we know about the group, they raise questions about whether the organization's methods may have contributed to the psychological crises experienced by vulnerable young women. Sociologists have pointed out that these kinds of stories often cluster in societies going through rapid change. Ruslana and Anastasia were children of parents raised in the Soviet Union, suddenly thrown into a different reality where old structures had vanished and new values weren't yet clear. Former Soviet republics have some of the world's highest rates of self-inflicted loss. Kazakhstan and Russia are among them. The fashion industry didn't cause these tragedies, but it did create the conditions in which a group like Rose of the World could prey on them. The loneliness, the pressure, the constant judgment, the feeling that you are disposable the moment a younger face arrives. Whether the organization's methods directly contributed to their deaths remains contested. Police investigations found no criminal wrongdoing. But the pattern, two friends, both attending the same controversial training program, both dying in eerily similar ways within a year, has led journalists and observers to question what role, if any, the group played in their final months. So what is the legacy of Ruslana Korshunova and Anastasia Drozdova? Behind every fairy tale image, there is a real person with limits. For the two lost girls, the price of chasing perfection was everything. If you're watching this and recognize pieces of yourself in their story, Feeling isolated, overwhelmed, or pulled into something that doesn't feel healthy, please talk to someone you trust or reach out to local support in your country. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.